Okay, good evening. Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, we're back on track. Continuing in the book of Genesis, we are up to the Torah reading that is called a Vayeira. And most of the Torah readings that we read, the name of the Torah portion is very much linked to the first sentence of the Torah, the portion. So actually, sorry, I don't have the beginning here, but the very beginning. All right, so just recap where we were last week. So we had Lech Lecha. We're talking about Abraham. We have Abraham. We're now the rest of the book of Genesis is really talking about Abraham and the lessons that we can learn from him and from his wife and from the things that happened and how he responded and what the forces that he put into the universe, the way in which he behaved and the things that he did and what he became, then sort of locked into the spiritual DNA that then we all inherit as Jewish people. So we have to thank Abraham for all of these things that he went through, all of the troubles and all of the difficulties and all of the things that he overcame and all of the strengths and how he became such an amazing and a magnificent person, that all of these things then we benefit from that. So to go back and learn and say, okay, what did Abraham do? How did he respond? What happened to him? What were the choices that he made? What were the actions that he did? And how did we bring that into our lives? And I think that when we read Torah, we're not just reading it as biblical stories that go back, thousands of years ago. They are lessons for us to learn, not only who we are today as a Jewish people and who we are as individuals, but what it is that we can become. We become inspired by the people, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the foremothers, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. We learn about them. And I'd like to actually just, while I'm speaking about the three patriarchs, the four matriarchs, and the conversation about, who's more important. And I'd like to add a Kabbalistic teaching that I think is very fundamental to understanding why it is that when we speak in our prayers, very much it's about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we don't speak as much in our prayers about the foremothers. What's that about? And I'd like to introduce an idea that I heard that I think is very profound and very important to understand, and that is that in the universe there exists male energies and there exists female energies, and they're different, right? So we as people who exist are a composite of male energy and female energy. Yes, back when Adam was the first man, he was all male energy, and Eve, Chava, was all female energy. But we are all a composite of the two. So male energy is more of a term, a name given to the energy that is one of potential, one of putting out the ideas, the concepts, the getting ahead, in the male biology, the male provides millions of sperm, millions of potential that gets thrown out of the universe. That's kind of like the male energy that gets put out into the universe. And what's the female energy? The female energy is to take one or two or three of that potential and actualize it, to take it internal, like the feminine body, the female body that houses the baby that grows inside. So that biological construct is a way to understand the energies that exist in the world. So the male energy is the potential that gets pushed into the world, and the female energy is the energy that kind of takes it from the potential and actualizes it. So, the millions of sperm that get thrown out, the woman takes one or two and then houses those and grows those, and they become part of her. And then she puts them out into the world. She actualizes them. She makes them concrete. She makes them tangible. She makes them real. So when we talk about Abraham and Sarah, which is what we're talking about now, we have Abraham with all his energies and all his potential and all the things that he was about. And you have Sarah, who kind of took all that and kind of actualized it physically and sort of in her tent and in her home and in her family, and how she made that into a reality, how she actualized that. So if you think about a stool, it needs at least three legs to be standing, to be able to stand up. So that's the three patriarchs. And a four-legged stool is much more solid. We have four matriarchs. So we have the three patriarchs who are sort of putting the potential into the world, and the four matriarchs who are much more solid, much more grounded, much more kind of bringing it out and actualizing it. So just put that out there as a kind of like a prologue to what we're going to learn about now. So last week, Lech Lecha, we had Abraham leaving his parents' home and traveling and all the different things that happened to him in last week's Torah portion. And now we have a lot more that happens in this week's Torah portion. So let's dive right in. Let's start at the very beginning of this Torah portion of Vayeira. And the first sentence says, and God appeared to him, to Abraham, in the plains of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day. He lifted his eyes and saw, and behold, 3 men were standing before him. He saw, and he ran towards them from the entrance of the tent and bowed towards the ground. So we have just a little backlog. Abraham, who had circumcised himself and was now 3 days post his circumcision, and that is considered to be the most painful time for a person, especially an old man of the age of Abraham was, to have circumcised himself. And so he's sitting there, he's in pain, he is a, quote unquote, a sick man, and we understand that God comes to visit him, God pays a sick call, like he's coming to be with him. Interesting point is that Abraham is he's sitting at his tent, and God comes to visit him. So you think that, if a king comes to visit you in your home, you stand up when the king arrives. So God says, no, don't want you to stand up when I'm coming to visit you. Why? Because you might think that that's your home, but it's not really your home, it's my home. Like, I am the creator of the universe. I am the owner of everything that exists in the whole world. And you might think that this is your tent and you own it and you're welcoming me into your tent. But, let's set the record straight. I'm the owner of the world, and this whole everything here, it belongs to me, and you're my guest in the world. So don't get up, sit down. So that kind of flips it over. Instead of the idea that Abraham is welcoming God as a visitor, God saying, no, really, this is my world, and you're in my world. So don't stand up. I'm coming to visit you. I'm paying a sick call, and this is the source of the Torah. The God command, so to speak, for us to visit sick people. We are told to be godlike. How do we know how to be godlike? Because we look into the Torah and we say, what did God do? How do we understand how God manifests himself in the world? So here we see that God visits Abraham. He comes to visit him as a sick man who's just had a circumcision. He's sitting there in pain, and God comes to visit him. So from this we learn that we also should be godlike, meaning that we should also visit sick people. And God, who's the creator of the universe, coming to visit a mere mortal, coming to visit a man made of dust and ashes, so to speak, made from the ground, made from, he's not elevated like the angels, he's a man. And God comes to visit him, so much so that there's no one that is beneath us to visit. We should be visiting all sick people. And actually there's a Kabbalistic understanding that that above the head of a sick person is the divine presence, the Shekhinah, the feminine attribute of the divine presence is present above the head of a sick person. So we're going to visit a sick person. We have to bear that in mind, number one. Number two, we are enjoined to remember, 100% remember, that you're visiting the sick person is not for you, it's for them. Right? So, sometimes you make a great effort to go visit somebody in the hospital, and, you get stuck in traffic and and finally you can't park, and then you end up parking. It costs you, a lot of money because you have to park in the lot when they're overcharging you and you're annoyed, whatever. And you go and you visit the sick person, and the person's asleep, and they don't really want visitors right then. And you could think, well, I made all this great effort to come visit you. Could you wake up so I can visit you? And we have to really kind of humble ourselves and say, no, I made my effort, I put my efforts in. My effort was to come visit you. It's not a good time, and it's not about me, it's about you. So I'm coming to visit you. Let's remember that, number one, number two, number three, whatever. That let's say the person is receiving guests and you come in, that one of the things that we are enjoined to do when we actually are in the presence of a sick person is to pray for them, to ask God to heal them. And again, we see that there are many times in the Torah where people pray for other people, but when we visit a sick person, we have a first-hand encounter with the sick person, and we can really be motivated to see, oh, this person's so sad, or this person's so lonely, or this person's so separated from his family, etc. So it motivates me to pray more for that person. So that would be another reason to go visit a sick person, is in order to have a greater understanding of the situation they're in, and then pray for them with more intention and more meaning and more understanding of the plight of the person. And then another reason why we would visit a sick person, and I think this is actually even true today, especially in hospitals, where maybe the hospital staff isn't so on top of the pain medication, or isn't on top of the needs of the person, isn't bringing water when they need it or food when they need it, and you coming to visit, you can help satisfy the needs of the person. They might not be able to get up and get water for themselves, or get pain medication or whatever it is they need, and you can be the person that can take care of their needs when you're there. So that would be a few reasons that would make it in not only like most importantly, because God manifests himself in the world as visiting Abraham. So we who want to be godlike, we who want to follow in the footsteps of God, then look into the Torah and say, how do I do that? One of the ways I do that is I visit sick people. But I also have to know that it's not for me. And when Abraham sees these three men, he leaves the divine presence and he goes to welcome the visitors, which is very interesting, because you think, well, if I had a king in my house, I wouldn't go off and find some and take care of some random people walking by in the street. So how is it that Abraham gets up and he leaves the divine presence and he goes to take care of these three wandering people in the desert? So I heard an analogy, like if you're talking to somebody, if I'm talking to one of my children, and maybe I've taught them, or I hope I've taught them, that it's very important to take care of people. It's very important to look out for and to welcome people into your home, to welcome guests. And so I'm talking to them on the phone, and they say, oh, Mummy, I have to go because there's somebody at the door and I have to go take care of them. So I wouldn't say, no, you can't go to the door, you have to talk to me. I would say, of course, like that is what I taught you to do. So, maybe, so to speak, God's happy for Abraham to leave the divine presence and go and take care, because that is the partnership that God wants from us in the world. He wants us to recognize the divine presence in the other, that these men that are walking down the street that have needs, they are made in the image of God, that they have holiness about them, that welcoming them and being sort of taking care of them is part of what our role is, and that's what God wants us to do more than he wants us to stay in conversation with him. So it's kind of an interesting kind of like lesson that we learn here, that Abraham, even though he's being visited by God because he's sick and he's in this state of pain after his circumcision, when he sees these men walking by, he gets up because he is a man of chesed. He is a man of kindness. Like his whole essence oozes kindness, and he gets so much pleasure, so much desire to do and to do kindness, that he gets up and he runs over and to welcome these three men. Turns out, we learned that these three men are angels. And I want to say something else. So right now we have two very important ways in which we can we can do something really good in the world. One is to visit sick people, and the other is to welcome guests. And every morning in the prayer service, it says that there are things whose fruits we eat in this world, but whose full reward awaits us in the world to come. And these are the things that we are taught. Not only do we benefit from in this world, but we will get benefit from in the next world, right? So we say this every day. What are the things? Honoring parents, acts of kindness, arriving early at the house of study, morning and evening, hospitality to strangers, right there, visiting the sick, helping the needy bride, attending to the dead, devotion in prayer, and bringing peace between people. And then it says, and the study of Torah is equal to them all, because when you study Torah, you come to do these things. So in this list of ways in which we are supposed to be in the world, not only for this world, but for the next world, two of the things that we are told, asked to do is to be hospitable to strangers and to visit the sick. And they're right here in this week's Torah portion. The hospitality to strangers. So when Abraham runs, he runs. Again, there's another lesson here in running. He doesn't just saunter over and kind of like, like, oh, woo. Like he runs over there, meaning expand it out and say, when there's something good to do in the world, don't leave it. Don't say, oh, I'll get to it later, or I'll do it some other time, or perhaps I'll get to it. No, we're supposed to like get up and run and do it. Like that's the priority. The priority right now for Abraham was not to sit there at the tent and wallow in his pain and to have this audience with God, but really he had this alacrity, he had this desire to get up and go and do and be kind and take care of these people. And so he didn't lose a moment. He got up and he ran to take care of them. And he brings them into his home, he washes their feet, and he feeds them. So he tells his wife to prepare food. He tells his son to help them. Also, his son at that time is Yishmael. He tells Yishmael to take care of the guests also. So from that we learn the importance of teaching somebody by, not just by telling them what to do, but by our own actions, by example. So Abraham is an example to his son Yishmael of how to take care of strangers, right? Okay, so I'm going to now, me, Abraham, I'm going to go and get a calf to feed the strangers that are coming to my house. I'm going to get this calf. And apparently he runs after this particular calf that's running away. And there's a story, a medrash, that says that he runs into a cave. And he's chasing this calf into a cave. This is a great story. He runs into this cave, and there's the calf, and he actually literally runs into the cave where Adam is buried. Like, this is crazy. This is the cave of Machpelah, the cave that in Hebron, where the patriarchs and matriarchs are all buried. Most of them are buried, and Adam is buried there. And Adam, whose fall was from not eating correctly, right? He ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He shouldn't have eaten from that tree. And so his downfall was from food, from eating incorrectly. And he says to Abraham, you got to make sure you get this right. You got to make sure that when you eat and when you serve food, that you talk Torah, that you take care of the needs of your guests, and that you fulfill their needs. This is really important, because you're going to make up for the fact that I messed up with food. So it's really interesting. That's a kind of a story, the legend that comes out, that Abraham, when he's chasing after this calf to give to the guests, that he runs into the cave of Machpelah. He runs into the cave where Adam is buried, and Adam says to him, you've got to do this right. You've got to talk Torah, and you've got to take care of them well, and you've got to be hospitable, and you've got to go out of your way, and you've got to do it with alacrity and like with speed and with joy, and all of these good attributes, and you've got to do it because I messed up and I need you to fix that. So it's an interesting story. So he comes back, and in fact, we learned that he killed three calves, because each one of the guests got a tongue, a calf tongue, with mustard, apparently. So they each got their own tongue, meaning that he went out of his way. He didn't just get one cow and divide it up into three portions. He wanted the choice tongue. I guess that's the choice part, speaking as a vegetarian, that he wanted each of these angels. Didn't realize they were angels. He didn't see them as angels, but he wanted them to have the choice cut of the calf. So he slaughtered 3 animals to give them the choice parts. And it says in the Torah that he said to his son, let's give them a morsel of food. But he's not giving them a morsel of food. He's giving them a lavish feast. And from this we learn the idea of saying little and doing much. Like we don't have to go on and on and on about all the things we do. We can say little and do much. So that aphorism sort of applies here to Abraham, who's saying to his Ishmael, his son, let's give them a morsel of food, or say to the guests that he's bringing in, we're going to give you a morsel of food, but he gives them a lavish feast. He really takes care of them really well. So there are 3 angels. Turns out there are 3 angels, and the angels' names are Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, right? So there are 3 angels, and we learn that angels are spiritual forces, like energies that come into the world that have a particular mission to perform, that they come to perform one mission each. Every time Michael comes into the world or Raphael comes into the world, he comes with a certain mission, and it's linked to their names. So Michael is the angel that represents faith and munah, that he's the angel of I'm doing this because God tells me to do it. I'm one with God. I have faith in God. I believe in God. I know of God, and that's the Michael force. So that force of Michael is the force. This is the angel. So this angel comes to tell Abraham that Sarah is going to have a baby, right? Which is an amazing thing, because they're they're advanced in age. They're old people. Sarah had finished her menses. She's not menstruating anymore. It's like not normal for her to be able to conceive a child. And this angel Michael tells Abraham that in a year from now, informs him that in a year from now Sarah will give birth, that there will be a baby. And Abraham is overjoyed. We also learn that Sarah overhears this and she laughs. So we can talk about that a little bit later, about what that means, that she laughs at this, that she doesn't really believe that that can happen. Is it possible that that can happen? Who are these people that are predicting this? This is a crazy idea. And maybe from that we can think, well, really God can do anything. We get locked in and saying, this is my life and nothing's going to change and I can't do this and I can't do that and that's never going to happen. And I think that this might be a good place to think about the idea of saying, well, maybe I'm not limited. I'm limited by what will be. In retrospect, I can look back and say, well, that didn't happen. But as I'm going forward in life, I can always have hope. I can always believe in a miracle. I can always believe that God can do anything, because God can do anything. And God does make Sarah conceive and have a baby, Yitzchak, with Isaac. But hearing this from this angel Michael, she doesn't quite believe it. She laughs. And I wonder in our lives when we say, oh, I'll never do that, or I'll never go here, or never do that, or this company, or whatever it is that we're engaged in, and say, well, am I limiting myself? Or if I'm sick, will I ever get better? And we don't know. We don't know. And I'm in the medical field myself. My husband's a family doctor. And many times we hear about doctors who say to patients, you only have 6 months to live. You're not going to live. But we always feel like there has to be hope. We have to give people hope. You never really know until it's over. It's not over, right? So until it really is the case, we hear of cases where people get healed and the disease goes away. It happens. So why do we have to give up? Why do we have to say there's no hope ever? So I'd like to suggest that as a person of hope, as a person understanding that God can really do anything, that to integrate that somehow into our thinking, into our psyches, and not feel like we are necessarily limited. And that things can't be, I'm never going to be a basketball star, but there are things that I feel like I can achieve. I'll put my efforts in, but I don't know whether I will achieve them or not. And I won't know until I look back and say, okay, I didn't achieve it, or I did, right? So just to introduce the idea of hope, the idea that Abraham, when he heard from the angel Michael that he was going to have a baby, he was so overjoyed, like he believed it. He says, that's amazing, this is amazing. and he's so happy that he's going to have a baby, and that this is where the promise that God made to him, that he will be the father of great nations, and that he will have many descendants like the stars. We talked about it last week, about the stars in the sky, in the sand, in the sand, in the desert. That's what's going to come from him. And so he's overjoyed, and he laughs too, but it's a laugh of joy. Okay, so the second angel that comes to visit Abraham in this tent is the angel Gabriel. So the angel Gabriel, the force there is gevura, is strength, is kind of justice, of like rigidity and limits and discipline, and kind of like, okay, this is the other side of the coin of kindness, is that there has to be a limit to the kindness. There's a kind of a kind of a boundary, right? So if we're super, super kind all the time, we'll end up like a dish rag, but we have to have a limit, right? So that's gevura. So this angel Gabriel represents the force of limitation, of strength, of discipline, etc. And so this angel Gabriel tells Abraham that the city of Sodom and Gomorrah will be destroyed. And what does Abraham do with this knowledge? So Abraham argues with God. and he prays for the people in this metropolis of Sodom, and he says, if there are righteous people, will you God destroy the righteous along with the wicked? You can't do that. That's not just. That's not kind. Abraham, who is the epitome, whose pores ooze with kindness. You can't do that, God. And he fights with God, and he argues with God, which is kind of an interesting introduction to our capability to not take things lightly, to say, okay, I don't want this. We pray for people and we petition God and we say, don't let this happen, and we pray and we fight against God and we're angry with God, but there's all part of the relationship that we have, and it goes back to, again, the DNA that's set down by Abraham, who's arguing with God. So don't destroy the people. If there might be righteous people, don't destroy the righteous along with the wicked. So God argues with him back and forth. They whittle it down. Will you save this grand metropolis of Sodom and Gomorrah if there are 50 righteous people? And God says, okay, I'll I'll not destroy for 50. And then, well, what if there's 45? And what if there's 40? What if there's 30? What if there's 20? And he brings it down to 10. So Abraham says, okay, if there are 10 righteous people in this whole grand metropolis, God says, okay, I won't destroy Sodom. And turns out, interestingly, that Lot, who is Abraham's nephew, he's the son of his deceased brother Haran. So Lot lives in, we talked about last week, where Lot separates from Abraham and he goes to live in the city of Sodom, which is known as a place which is the antithesis of hospitality to Abraham. Abraham is out there with his tent open at four sides, welcoming strangers all the time, welcoming everybody in, feeding them, taking care of them, drinking them, escorting them, doing everything that he needs to do. And Sodom is the antithesis of that. Like, they hate guests, they don't want guests, they fight against guests, they penalize people who do exercise hospitality. And Lot goes to live there, and he's living there, and he has in his household, he has 10 people. It's him and his wife and his married daughters and their spouses and 2 unmarried daughters. So there are 10 members of Lot's household. And so at the end of this bargaining back and forth with God, Abraham says, if there's 10 people in the whole of the metropolis, will you, like, he's thinking of his nephew and his family, will you save them? And God says, yes, you will. But there aren't. So what happens is, wait, I'll finish this. I'll come back to Lot in a minute. So let me just finish the three angels. So Michael comes to say, you will have a child. This is the angel of faith, of emunah, of understanding that God runs the world, God's in charge. Then we have Gabriel, who says the city of Sodom is going to be destroyed, and Abraham argues with him, and he's the angel of strictness and justice and delineation and discipline. And then we have a third angel, and he's the angel Raphael Refuah. He's the angel of healing, and he comes to help heal Abraham after his circumcision. So he's present there along with the other 2 angels. And I'd like to just mention, because I love this prayer, there's a prayer we say at night before we go to bed. And the prayer we say at night before we go to bed is, in the name of the Lord God of Israel, may Michael be at my right hand. Can I have faith? Can I understand that there's God in the world who runs the world? Can I have Michael there, this angel, this force of emunah, of faith, on my right hand? Can I have Gabriel on my left side, this discipline and this ability to kind of say no, and the ability to have kind of a boundary? I need that too. So I have Michael on my right side, I have Gabriel on my left side, I have in front of me Uriel. Uriel is light, clarity. In front of me, I will understand the ways of God, and I will understand how to live my life, and I'll have clarity. So in front of me, I want clarity. I want to be able to see where I'm going and what path I'm on and feel good about it, because I have Uriel who's lighting the way and showing me how to go. And then behind me, I have Raphael. So he's my healing angel. He's the force that's gonna preempt any dangers and heal me from all sickness, and he's the one that's going to prevent any untoward negative things happening to me, you know, that I don't see, that I'm not aware of, that's behind me. He's the angel of healing. He's going to be behind me. So here I'm asking God to surround me with these angels. I'm going to have Michael and Gabriel and Uriel and Raphael, and these angels, I ask God to surround me with these angels when I go to bed, and above my head, the presence of God. So what an amazing picture, an image to say, please God, when I go to sleep, surround me with all these forces. That's what I want to be surrounded by. Surround me with these forces. And we pray for that. So here's these 3 angels. They come to Abraham and they tell him these 3 things. Each angel has their own mission, right? So one is that that you will have a child. The other one is that God's going to destroy Sodom, and the third one is that he's there to heal him from his circumcision. So 2 of these angels continue on their journey, and they go to visit Lot after they've visited Abraham, and he escorts them. He, again, another I really think this is a very important teaching character trait that we should internalize, is escorting our guests. And it is a halacha, it is something that we put into Jewish law, that in order to satisfy the commandment of welcoming visitors is not only to welcome them in, to go to the door and meet them and greet them and bring them in, go outside your house and look for them and find them and bring them in, and welcome them and feed them and give them drink and satisfy all their needs, etc. But then when it's time for them to go and they leave, then you don't just say goodbye from your dining room table or your living room or your kitchen. You leave. You go with them. You escort them out. You take them out. And actually it says to take them 4 amos, like at least 4 steps outside of your house, like to take them not just to the front door, but like to walk outside with them, and like you're sorry that they're leaving. You don't want them to leave. You want them to stay. It depends how far you want to go. They might be really cold or whatever, but to like I try to at least walk people down the stairs outside my house, whatever. It's just to kind of like feel like I want you to know that I really appreciated you coming. I really wanted you to be in my home, and I'm sad you're leaving. I'd love for you to stay a little bit longer, and I'm going to escort you out. And Abraham's the one we learned that from. Abraham escorts the angels as they're leaving when they're done with his visit with them. And where did they go? They go to visit Lot, because they're trying to save Lot. So who goes to Lot? So there's 3 angels that come to Abraham. There's 2 angels that go visit Lot. So these are the angels that visit Lot are Raphael and Gabriel. So Gabriel obviously is the angel that's going to destroy Sodom. That's the force of Gevurah, of strictness and strength. So he's going to come, and he's going to force the energy that's going to destroy Sodom. And Raphael is the one who's coming to save Lot. He's the angel of healing and of blocking the negativity, so to speak. So his mission is to save Lot. So they come to the city of Sodom, and Lot, who has learnt from Abraham to welcome guests, he welcomes them, even though the culture that he's in of Sodom is very antithetical to hospitality, and they don't like guests, and they attack Lot and his family, and they come to the house and they knock on the door and like, give us your guests. They shouldn't be here. We're going to like do evil things to them, whatever. And Lot won't give them up. I'm not going to go into what happens so much, because there's too much. There's too many details there. But he won't give them up. And the angel Raphael says, "Come on, we gotta go," because the angel Gabriel's about to like destroy, and what's going to happen is sulfur is going to come down. It's going to rain down from heaven, acid and sulfur, and it's going to rain down, and it's going to destroy the whole area, and we have to get out. So Lot and his wife and his 2 unmarried daughters, the other children of Lot and the son-in-laws, they don't believe it. They don't really want to go. Like, Lot has been unable to influence his household. Like he as much as he held on to the character trait of hachnasas arachim, of welcoming guests, he was very much a part of the culture of Sodom, which was wicked, which was evil, and he wasn't able to influence his household. His wife comes with him, and his 2 unmarried daughters come with him, and the angel Raphael, who's saving them, and they run. And God tells them not to look back. Don't look back at the city of Sodom and Gomorrah as it's being destroyed. And perhaps we all know the story that Lot's wife looks back. She looks back, and she gets turned into a pillar of salt. Okay, so really interesting. I'll share a few things I learned. And one of those is that as the city is being destroyed, that Lot really believes that the city is going to be destroyed, and he's really scared. And out of that fear, he does teshuvah, like he goes back to his like root soul. He goes back to like being a good person, perhaps, and he's really scared, and he's really like, okay, I'm like, I better get out of here, and he runs, and he does not look back. He turns his back on the wickedness of Sodom. He moves forward. He's going to go forward now. He's not looking back. Back was bad. Forward is good. I'm going with the angel. I'm looking that way. But Lot's wife doesn't. She doesn't completely let go. She has a part of her that still identifies with the wickedness of the city of Lot, of city of Sodom, where she was living, where she became part of that city. It was part of who she was. And it was too much for her to not look back. Looking back was indicative, just demonstrated that she still had an allegiance, an identification with that city, and she looked back, and that was her downfall. So she gets turned into a pillar of salt. So what's the pillar of salt about? So I heard 2 things about why pillar of salt. One is that when Lot would welcome guests in, she was not so cool with that. And he would say, could you, like we learned before, where Abraham's welcoming the guests, and he says to his wife, can you bake bread, and can you do this? And it gets Ishmael, and the whole household's running around helping the guests. So Lot does the same thing, and he says to his wife, can you help, can you cook, can you do this? And she cooks, because she has to, because her husband asked her to, but she doesn't go the extra mile. She doesn't put the salt in. She doesn't do anything like extra to make it like really flavorful, or to make it really nice. Like, she does the bare minimum, and she doesn't add the salt. So the salt is like indicative of her not really buying in to the character traits of welcoming guests. and so she gets turned into salt. The other thing I heard about salt was that salt represents something that preserves. It preserves the food you put salt on, right? So it's kind of like keeps it quote unquote fresh, or it keeps it from decaying. And so in the same way that when Lot's wife was leaving Sodom, that she was still holding on. She still wanted to preserve some of the values, some of the life that she had before, and that preservation of the negativity of something that she couldn't let go of was represented by the salt. So she gets turned into a pillar of salt. So I thought those are two interesting ways of kind of trying to understand why it was salt. So one was because she refused to put, she was like passive aggressive by not putting salt in the food. She didn't really want to be part of that whole, good thing about welcoming guests and being hospitable. And the other one was that she was still holding onto and preserving some of the negativity of the city of Sodom, and her looking back demonstrated her identification still, and her like wanting to know what happened to that city. And she looks back and she gets turned into salt. So Lot continues on with his two daughters, and they end up in a cave, blah blah blah. So I'm not going to go into that. Abraham, he sees the city is this whole area is destroyed. I mean, it looks like it's everything's gone, everything's been destroyed, and he travels. Abraham travels, and he ends up in the area of the Philistines. He ends up in the city called Gerar, and now he has an encounter with Avimelech. So Avimelech, the king, and if you remember last week, we had Abraham and Sarah going down to Egypt, and how the Pharaoh wanted to have Sarah as one of his wives in his harem, and there was a whole thing that went on there. We have a repeat going on here, where Avimelech takes Abraham's wife. He thinks he's being told that she is Abraham's sister. He doesn't know or understand that Abraham and Sarah are married. He takes Sarah to be in his entourage, so to speak. And because he does that, he gets afflicted with a plague. The whole of the people of Avimelech's kingdom get afflicted with a particular ailment, such that all their orifices, all their, like they're unable to go to the bathroom, and they're unable to eat, and they're unable to bear children, that the orifices, all the holes and cavities that people have, get stopped up, get blocked. And they are unable to bear children. They're unable to go to the bathroom. It's really uncomfortable. So Avimelech has a dream, blah, blah, blah. He understands that Sarah is really Abraham's wife, and he has a whole conversation with Abraham. And Abraham, this is crucial, Abraham prays for Avimelech. He prays for Avimelech, and his prayer gets answered, such that all the orifices of all the people in the kingdom whose orifices and cavities and everything have been blocked are now opened. And all the people who, couldn't give birth are now giving birth. And in the merit of Abraham praying for the kingdom, for Avimelech and his kingdom, in that merit of praying for them to be cured, Sarah becomes pregnant and has Isaac. And what we learn from this is an incredible idea that we have in our tradition, which is that as much as I might pray for myself, or I might pray for my family, like I want to be healed if I'm sick, or I want my husband to be healed, or I want my friends to be healed, or I want people I know to be healed, that there's an idea that if we pray for somebody else that perhaps has the same condition that we have, we pray for that person, that God answers our prayers first, that we get that same prayer answered for us. So Abraham is praying for Avimelech, and Avimelech gets healed and his kingdom gets healed. But he also, Sarah gets pregnant, which has been predicted before by the angel Michael, and that this was going to happen. But this is the mechanism by which it happens, that Abraham praying for another has this effect where it benefits him too. So as much as we might pray, so there are actually organizations, it's really amazing. There are Jewish organizations, if you're interested, I can hook you up with them. But there are certainly infertility, like if you have a certain infertility and you pray, they match you, this organization matches you with someone with the exact same condition as you, and you pray for that person, and they give you, psalms to say, etc., and the name of the person, and you pray for that person. You might even not know that person, but you pray for them, and you have that same condition, that not that you should pray for yourself, but that in the act of praying for the other person, God then hears your prayers, not that he doesn't hear your prayers, but there's a bigger mechanism at play here, that we're all part of a bigger collective. And so this idea that if I pray for you and you pray for me and we all pray for each other, that there will be a greater downpouring of blessing and healing that comes into the world, that will happen. So what's amazing is that when the kingdom of Avimelech gets healed, that all these women give birth, and one of whom is Sarah. She gives birth too, and she laughs. Remember how we said before that when she heard that she was going to get pregnant, that she laughed. But when she gives birth, she also laughs, and the whole of that kingdom is joyous, because they're all giving birth. They all were unable to, and now they are, and they all were sick, and now they're healed. And there was a great source of simcha that happened in that town. I don't know where I read that, but I think it's an amazing idea that there's this joy and this laughter, but it's not a derisive, mocking kind of laughter. It's a happy laughter. It's the laughter that Abraham laughed when Michael told him that he would have a child a year from now, like that pure joy, like I believe this and I'm so happy and I can't wait, and it's so exciting. You know, you go through years and years of infertility and God says you're going to have a baby and you don't believe it, but you do believe it, and you laugh. And this kingdom of Avimelech had been afflicted in such a way that they didn't see an end to it, and then they're miraculously healed because of the prayers of Abraham, and Sarah has a baby, and all the people in this area having babies, and everybody's healed and everybody's loved, and there's great joy. And that's the name Yitzchak. Yitzchak means laughter. So that's how he gets the name Yitzchak, is the laughter, the joy that comes from the pure joy, I don't know, simcha, the something that's not just happy. It's like I can now, like there's something bigger than me that's happening. There's something beyond me that's happening. There's something that I wanted that is happening, but it's happening because God also wants it, and it's part of a bigger picture, and I'm part of that bigger picture, and it has so much meaning, and it's so good, and I'm so part of it that my soul is singing, and that soul singing kind of laughter is what Yitzchak is named for, is what Sarah's experiencing, is what the whole area is experiencing, is what it says in the Medrash. It's kind of a really amazing idea. So anyway, so there's a lot of joy that goes on when Yitzchak is born. So then we have the episode after Yitzchak is born, after Abraham prays for Avimelech, praying for the other, this idea of praying for the other. Isaac's born, he's circumcised on the 8th day. And then we have this whole incident with Ishmael, who is the 13-year-old, I think he's 13 at that time, 13, maybe he's a little older, I don't know, son of Abraham, and Hagar. So Hagar was the wife that Sarah, the maid servant that she gave Abraham, so that Abraham could have children. And Ishmael is acting in a way that's very inappropriate, and there's a lot of commentaries about what it was, how it was that Ishmael was a very negative influence on the household, and what kind of influence it had on Isaac. And so Sarah says we have to get rid of Ishmael. He has to be expelled from the home. God says, listen to your wife. He has to go. And so Abraham, again, against his nature, he's a man of kindness. He's a man of love. He loves God, he loves people, he's kind, he's just oozing kindness. Like for him to be told by God, listen to your wife Sarah and expel Ishmael and Hagar from your home. They are negative influences and you have to expel them. And he does. It's really hard for him and he does it. And again, so Ishmael and Hagar, he gives them water, he gives them provisions for the desert, and they go off. And Hagar, they run out of water and they're literally dehydrating. Hagar doesn't know how to sit with Ishmael as he's without water in the desert, and she sits from afar and she cries, and Ishmael cries. God hears the prayers of Ishmael, and he lifts up the eyes of Hagar, and she sees a well, and she gets water from the well, and they continue on their journey. This idea of lifting up the eyes, that God showed Hagar the well. And there's a lot of commentary that suggests that the well was always there, but she couldn't see it. She was so mired in her, a woe is me, and this is my situation forever. This is the way it's going to be. And there's a very interesting book. I think it's called Option B, and it was written by Sheryl Sandberg. who I believe is CEO of Google or one of those companies. Can't remember which one. Maybe you can correct me on that. But anyway, she wrote a book. Her husband, had a heart attack. They were on vacation. He had a heart attack, and he died. And she wrote this book. Like, option A was, I was going to live my life with my husband, and this was the way it's going to be. And now she's left with her children. I think she has a couple of children, and she's a young widow, and her husband dies. And she says the resilience that she needed to go forward and to live on. And she uses the acronym, or the 3 Ps, the tragedy that happened to her. She couldn't take it personally. If she took it personally, then it would be she would feel too guilty. She would be mired in this sense of guilt and blaming oneself and taking it personally. That we can't do that. Like, the things that come our way and the things that happen to us, yes, we can look and say, what can I learn from this and how can I be better? But to say, like, I'm a bad person and I'm guilty and it's happening because I did this and this, like, it's might be too much for us to really integrate that. So be careful with how we personalize the things that happen to us. She said that the pervasiveness of the situation, like, it might feel like everything's black and there's nothing that's all encompassing, and there's nothing that's going to get me out of this, and it's just the kind of the end of everything. That's not the case. That yes, this might be the black cloud, but there's other things in your life that are also important and also good. But so don't sort of make the thing that's happening to you encompass you forever, right? And then the permanence, that it's not permanent, that you won't always feel this way. So these are the 3 Ps that Sheryl Sandberg brings out and says, like don't take it personally. It's not all pervasive. There are still good things in your life, whether you can see them or not at different times. Maybe you can see them, maybe you can't see them, but it's not all that is your life, and it's not permanent. It doesn't stay like this. And here's Hagar. And maybe she does these three things, right? So it's not always going to be like this, and it might not all be encompassing. And what are the good things? And there is a solution, and God lifts up her eyes and she sees the well. Like, she couldn't see the well before. She was so, like, down and sunk and in the pit that she couldn't see the well. And I'm not quite sure how to take ourselves individually in our reality out of that place of saying, well, I can't see the blessings that are around me, and I can't see the well of water that I can draw on to nourish me and to feed me and to help me become the person that I can be, right? Because I'm in this situation. So here's Hagar out in the desert with Ishmael, who's about to die of dehydration, but there's a well, but she doesn't see the well. So metaphorically, what's the well? What is it that we are not seeing that's in our vision, but we can't see it? So can we open our eyes? Can we like look around? Can we hold on to things? Can we where do we find the energy from to drink the water that's right there? But I can't see it because of whatever, so maybe somehow this idea of Hagar being in the desert, saying, I can't look at Ishmael dying. I have to separate myself from him. I have to go over here. Ishmael's crying. She's crying. God lifts up her eyes so she can see the well. She can drink from the well. She could give him to drink from the well, and she can survive and she can move on. So it's not permanent. It's not all pervasive, and perhaps it's not personal, right? So those are things to maybe think about. Like, can we see the metaphorical well that's in our world where we're feeling bleak and we feel like there's nothing to hold on to, and there's nothing good? Where's the good? Where's the well? Where's the water? And is it right here all along? And what's my solution? Like, how do I figure this out? So I thought that was an interesting way of looking at the Hagar story. And so I don't know that we really have time to finish, but the last thing that happens after Isaac is born, after Ishmael and Hagar are expelled from the home of Abraham and Sarah and Isaac, the next thing that happens is the binding of Isaac, the Kedas Yitzchak. And this is a huge topic, and I only have 10 minutes left, so I'm not going to really attempt anything to discuss this and how it is that God could ask Abraham to sacrifice his son. But I'm going to say 2 things. One of them is that, again, like I said at the very beginning of this shir, that the spiritual DNA of the way in which Abraham lived his life and the challenges that came his way and the way that he dealt with them and the choices that he made and what he built himself up to be is something we all inherit, right? So Abraham was willing. hearing, knowing 100% this is what God wants him to do. It wasn't, some random, like somebody said to him something. Like, he knew that God wanted him to do this. He had certainty that this is what God wanted of him, was to take his son, his only son, the one he loves, Isaac, take him up to the Har Moriah, to the Mount Moriah, which is right where right in the center of Jerusalem, right there onto Har Moriah, take him up there and to offer him up, right? So maybe offering him up doesn't necessarily mean sacrificing him, but anyway, that's how it's been interpreted, that he was asked to bring him up and offer him up. So I'd like to offer a couple of ways of looking at it. One is that what Abraham was learning and what we are all learning is that we don't own our children. That Abraham didn't own Isaac, right? So he's a guardian. We don't own anybody. We don't own anybody. We don't own our spouses or our children, or our parents don't own us. We are in relationship to each other, and we might be, so to speak, grapes on the vine together. We might be clustered up together. There might be a lot of spiritual things going on, but we are separate people. We are individual people, and we have an independence. We are not owned by anybody. And actually, if you take it out into a bigger picture, actually God, who is the creator of the universe, actually the whole world belongs to God. So we all belong to God on some level, which is why, we learn later as we get more into the Torah, you can't kill yourself. You can't do that, because it's not you. You don't own you. Or we can't kill ourselves. We can't put tattoos on ourselves. There are certain things that we can't do, because we are also, guardians of our soul, who is the you. That's you, right? But the God, we do perceive ourselves as separate, but the idea of ownership, and actually go back to the beginning when Abraham has his guests and people come to his home, and he has this inn. Actually, at the end of this week's Torah portion, he builds an eshel. He builds an inn, and actually there's two interpretations of what an eshel is. One is that it's an inn. It's like a motel that's free, and people can come and they can eat and they can drink and they can learn about God through Abraham. The other interpretation, it was like an orchard, that it was the fruits of kindness were being grown there, and the fruits were there to then distribute to the people. So we have the trees of the orchard are like root systems, that there's the root, the foundation of the world is kindness and love. Right, that's the foundation of the world, is kindness and love, and that the inn is the expression of how to manifest that out of the world, how to spread it, how to give food and drinks and escort people and take care of people and satisfy people's needs. That was what Abraham was all about, and that's who he was, and that's what he was doing. And when people would thank him, this is the point, when people would thank Abraham, thank you for the food, thank you for the drinks, he would say, don't thank me, this isn't my food, this isn't my water, thank God. Thank the creator of the universe. That's who you should be thanking. Don't thank me. Thank God. And back to at the end of this week's Torah portion with the bounding of Isaac, perhaps there's a part of that lesson that those of us who have children who have died, I don't know, I can say for myself that one of the lessons that I learned was that I didn't own him. Right? He wasn't mine. And we have Torah stories about people who've lost children, and they're not ours, right? So there's a story, I think in the Gemara, of a rabbi, and his children die on Shabbat, and I think his two sons, and they die on Shabbat. And his wife doesn't want to tell him because she doesn't want to upset him on Shabbat. So he goes about his Shabbat day and he does his things. And then at the end of Shabbat, she said to him, what if somebody gave you two precious jewels and said, please could you take care of these jewels? And you took care of the jewels. And then one day the person came back and said, they're my jewels, could you give them back to me? So you'd give them back because you don't own those jewels. And that's how she then imparted the information to her husband that these two sons had died. Again, I'm not going there. I just want to suggest that perhaps one of the lessons that we learn from the Akedah of Yitzchak is that we don't own anything in this world, not even our children. That's one thing. So very interestingly, when Isaac is on the altar and Abraham is about, he has the knife. He has the knife is literally at his neck. And Isaac's eyes are open. And it says that Abraham was crying. But it also says that the angels in heaven were crying. And the tears were going straight into Isaac's eyes. The tears of the angels in heaven were falling into Isaac's eyes. And he was blinded by those tears. I don't know, it's just another interesting kind of like imagery of the tears and what was going on here. And Abraham, who's doing what he knows God wants him to do, he has no doubt this is what God wants him to do, but he doesn't understand it because he was told that Isaac was going to be the one through whom he would be a great nation, that he would have many descendants like the stars in the sand. So he doesn't understand it. And there's doubt, like, I don't understand how you want me to sacrifice Isaac, and from Isaac will come the future, the future to come. And Rabbi Sachs says that what Abraham learnt was to live with uncertainty and maintain his faith. So I don't know quite how to expound upon that, but let's just hold that for a minute. To live with uncertainty, like I don't know how this is going to play out, but I have my faith and I know this is what you want me to do. And at the point where he's about to, so two things, at the point where he's about to to kill Isaac, again, never give up, right? Never give up. Isaac might have said, okay, this is it, I'm done, I'm a goner, right? You know, but Isaac didn't hear the prophecy from God. He heard it from Abraham. So Isaac on some level might even be on a higher level, because not only he didn't hear it from God, he heard it from Abraham. Listen to your parents. I don't know. Sometimes we have to listen to our parents. Sometimes we don't listen to our parents. But anyway, in there is something about child-parent relationship. Do I listen to my parents? Do I not? You know, do I go along? And it says that they went together, that Isaac went along with it, like he understood this is what God wanted from him, but he learned it from Abraham. Don't give up hope, right? Again, the message of don't give up hope. And at the point where Abraham's crying, the angels are crying, Isaac's crying. Is this what God wants? And then there's an angel, and a voice comes out and says, don't do it. Stop. Don't do it. Don't do it. And Abraham hears it. He hears it. And some of the commentators suggest that the reason that he could hear it was not that it was because he had, at the same time as he was crying and he was mourning that he had to kill his son, he was also happy to be doing God's will. So in the happiness, he was able to hear the angels, that the simcha, the joy that he had in fulfilling God's will, allowed him to have the openness to hear the angels say stop and don't do it. So that's kind of an interesting, again, back to the idea of simcha, back to the idea of joy, back to the idea that that is an important component of who we're supposed to be. Live with joy. Don't belittle the smile. The smiles are not to be belittled. They have importance because they open us up to blessing. They open us up to hearing divine prophecy. It says that when we are depressed and when we are sad, we don't have the same ability to rise up, to be open to to divinity, like to the inspiration that comes from the divine. That when we're happy, we have it, but not when we're sad. And Abraham, at this point, this junction, he was able to have this paradox experience of killing his son, which must have been a hugely, like beyond his nature, right? He was kindness. He was not a person who this was something he could do, and he was doing it because God wanted him to do it. So he's going above his nature, and at the same time, he's joyous because he's doing God's will, and like all mixed in together. And they said, no, don't do it. And he doesn't do it. And what's really interesting is that it says that in some places it says that Isaac actually died. He died on the altar, and his soul went up, and then when the angel said no, don't do it, and he didn't cut his neck, he didn't do it, the soul comes back. And from that comes the prayer that we say every morning, another prayer that we say every morning, one of my favorite prayers, which I would love to read to you because I'll end on this. The idea that what happened to Isaac was that his soul left him and his soul came back. His soul left him on that mizbeah, on that altar, but then he wasn't destined to die, he had to come back. And we learn from this the idea that in the future there will be there is death now, and in the future the souls will come back into the bodies that we've buried in the ground, that there will be a reconnection of body and soul. And here's the beginning of that idea, where Isaac on the altar loses his soul, he dies, the soul comes back, and he's revived and he's brought back to life. So the prayer we say in the morning, my God, the soul you placed within me is pure. You created it, you formed it, you breathed it into me, and you guard it while it is within me. One day you will take it from me and restore it to me in the time to come. As long as the soul is within me, I will thank you. Lord, my God, and God of my ancestors, master of all works, Lord of all souls, blessed are you, Lord, who restores souls to lifeless bodies. We say that every morning. And one of the reasons we say that every morning, not only because we learnt it here in the Isaac story, but that, I'll end with this, that the sleep is 1/60th of death. That when we sleep, there's an idea that our soul lifts out of our bodies, which is why dreams can be very powerful, because they enter into a higher realm. That 1/60th of our soul leaves our body, and when we wake up in the morning, please God, we wake up in the morning, our soul gets put back in, like locked back in. We get it back. So we say this prayer. Thank you for giving my soul back to me. And now I have another day where you, God, have faith in me that I have something good to do this day, the next day, every day, hoping that we continue to do good in the world. So I want to go back to the idea of Abraham as the foundational character of chesed, of kindness, that he is the epitome of kindness in the world, that he is the iconoclast, he's the trailblazer, he forges this new path of loving God, of teaching about God, of influencing people and bringing people close to the idea of God in the world as the creator of the universe, as the owner of everything, people, everything, food, you name it, everything belongs to God, right? We're just on loan. We're just here for the short term. We're just here fleetingly. And perhaps one of the reasons why Abraham was on some level, not just because he was obedient to God, but that he understood that there is more to this world, and that the idea of what God wanted him to do, to sacrifice his son, was that this isn't the whole thing anyway, right? The soul is going to continue into another realm. So, in there somewhere perhaps is something that Abraham had in his knowledge base to understand that this is really hard for me to do. I don't want to do this. This is antithetical to everything I believe in. And yet I also know that there's something beyond this world, beyond death, right? There's something that continues on, and that the soul can come back later, and there will be the resurrection. There will be the soul coming back. So I'll leave us with the idea of these angels, the angels that surround us at all times, Gabriel, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and above us the presence of God. And we should all perhaps, kind of like just meditate on the idea that there are in the universe these energies and these powers, and we should never give up, and that we should always have hope, and we should always do our best, and always, again, do the best we can and move forward and not give up hope, and live with alacrity, like when something good comes our way, to do it, to visit the sick, to welcome strangers into our home, and to do the best we can to emulate God in the world. So I wish you all a very good week.